You might be living a life that was never truly yours. That sentence may sound dramatic at first, but if you stop for a moment and really think about it, it becomes strangely uncomfortable. Because many people wake up every morning, follow their routines, fulfill their responsibilities, and move through life exactly the way they were taught to. And yet, somewhere deep inside, a quiet thought sometimes appears. A thought that most people quickly try to silence. What if this isn't the life I was meant to live? It's not that everything is terrible. Maybe your life looks completely normal. You work, you take care of things, you do what responsible adults are supposed to do. From the outside, nothing seems wrong. But inside, there can be a subtle feeling that something important is missing. Not money, not success, not comfort. Something deeper. A sense that the person living this life might not fully be you. This feeling is more common than people realize. In fact, millions of people quietly carry it with them every day. They build careers they never truly chose. They adopt goals that were handed to them by society. They shape their personalities around expectations. Little by little, without noticing it, they become the person they believe they are supposed to be. And at some point, years later, they pause and ask themselves a question that feels both simple and terrifying. How did I end up here? Sometimes that moment comes during a crisis, a job that suddenly feels meaningless, a relationship that reveals how lost you feel, a moment of silence where you realize that the direction you've been following no longer makes sense. But sometimes it happens in a much quieter way. You're sitting somewhere ordinary, maybe driving home after work, maybe lying awake at night, and a strange realization appears. You have spent so much time trying to become someone that you never truly discovered who you are. That realization can feel unsettling because it forces you to see something that most people try to avoid. Many of the choices we make are not truly ours. They are shaped by pressure, by expectations, by invisible rules we learned when we were young. Rules about what success should look like, rules about what kind of life is acceptable, rules about what kind of person we are supposed to become. Without realizing it, we follow these scripts for years, sometimes decades, until one day, something inside us begins to question everything. And then that question marks the beginning of a completely different journey. Not the journey of achieving more, not the journey of impressing people, but the journey of discovering the person behind all the expectations. Because the truth is this: most people spend their entire lives trying to build a life that looks right, without ever asking if it feels right. They chase approval, they chase stability, they chase the idea of success. But deep down, they remain disconnected from themselves. And when you are disconnected from who you truly are, life begins to feel strangely heavy. Even simple things start to drain your energy. Motivation fades. Direction becomes unclear, not because you are weak, but because you are trying to live a life that was never aligned with your true self. However, something powerful happens the moment you begin to question that life. The moment you pause and ask yourself the kinds of questions most people avoid. What do I actually want? What kind of life would feel real to me? Who am I when no one else's expectations are guiding me? Those questions are uncomfortable, but they are also incredibly important, because they open the door to a discovery that can quietly transform everything. The discovery of yourself. And once that discovery begins, something remarkable happens. You stop trying to become who the world wants you to be, and you start uncovering the person you were meant to become all along. That process is not instant. It doesn't happen overnight, but it changes the way you see everything, your choices, your priorities, your understanding of what truly matters. And slowly, as the layers of expectations begin to fall away, you begin to experience something that many people search for their entire lives. Clarity, freedom, authenticity. Because the moment you truly begin to understand yourself is the moment your real life begins. And in this audiobook, we are going to explore that journey. The journey of losing yourself, questioning everything, and finally discovering the person you were always meant to be. Chapter 1. How the world slowly made you lose yourself. Most people cannot point to the exact moment they lost themselves. There was no dramatic event, no single decision that changed everything overnight. Instead, it happened quietly, slowly, almost invisibly. At one point in your life, you were completely yourself. Think back to when you were a child, before the expectations, before the pressure to become something, before the constant comparisons. You didn't spend time worrying about whether you were impressive enough. You didn't question whether your interests were practical. You simply followed curiosity. If something fascinated you, you explored it. If something made you laugh, you enjoyed it. If something felt meaningful, you moved toward it. Your sense of identity came naturally. You didn't have to think about who you were, but you were simply living it. But as you grew older, something subtle began to change. The world started teaching you who you should be, not directly, not aggressively, but through thousands of small signals. Teachers praised certain behaviors. Parents encouraged certain paths. Society quietly communicated which kinds of lives were considered successful. At first, these lessons seemed harmless. They were often given with good intentions. Adults wanted you to have a stable future. They wanted you to be safe. They wanted you to succeed. So they guided you toward what seemed like the right direction. Study hard. Choose a respectable career. Build a stable life. From the outside, none of this seemed wrong. And in many ways, it wasn't. But something else happened at the same time. And you slowly began adjusting yourself to fit the expectations around you. Maybe you noticed that being quiet made adults approve of you more. Maybe you realized that certain interests were praised while others were dismissed. Maybe you learned that success came with admiration. So naturally, you started adapting. You focused on the things that brought approval. You avoided the things that created doubt or criticism. And with every small adjustment, you moved a little further away from the version of yourself that once acted freely. This process happens to almost everyone. In fact, it's so normal that most people never question it. They simply grow into the roles that society prepares for them: student, professional, responsible adult, and eventually someone who seems to have their life together. But somewhere along that journey, many people quietly lose contact with something important: their inner voice, the voice that once guided them toward what felt authentic. Instead of listening to that voice, they begin listening to expectations about what success should look like, expectations about what kind of life is respectable, expectations about what kind of person they should become. And because everyone around them appears to be doing the same thing, the process feels completely normal. Years pass. Life moves forward. Achievements accumulate. Responsibilities increase. From the outside, everything may appear successful, but something strange often happens during this stage of life. A quiet feeling begins to appear. It's difficult to explain. It's not necessarily sadness. It's not exactly dissatisfaction. It's more like a subtle sense of misalignment. Like you might feel it when you reach a milestone you once thought would make you happy, but it doesn't feel the way you expected. Or when you accomplish something impressive, yet the satisfaction fades surprisingly quickly. You might even notice it during ordinary moments. Driving home after work, sitting alone in silence, looking at the life you built and asking yourself a question that feels both simple and unsettling. How did I end up here? Not because the life is bad, but because it doesn't fully feel like it belongs to you. Many people respond to this feeling in the same way. They assume the solution is to achieve more progress, more money, more recognition. So they push themselves harder, They chase the next goal. They convince themselves that fulfillment must be waiting somewhere ahead, but that strange feeling often remains. Because the issue was never about achieving more. It was about something deeper. It was about losing connection with the person underneath all the expectations. The person who once had natural interests, natural curiosity, natural ways of experiencing the world. That person never truly disappeared. They were simply buried beneath years of adaptation, layers of responsibility, layers of social roles, layers of choices made to fit into a world that rewards conformity. Over time, those layers become so familiar that people forget they are even wearing them. They become extremely good at functioning, extremely good at meeting expectations. But when they pause long enough to ask themselves a very simple question, who am I really? The answer is often unclear, not because the answer doesn't exist, but because the world has spent years teaching them to look outward instead of inward. Yet despite all of this, something important remains true. The connection to your real self is never completely lost. It may become quiet, it may become buried, but it never disappears. It waits beneath the noise of expectations, waiting for the moment when you slow down long enough to notice it again. And when that moment finally arrives, something powerful begins. Not a new life, but the rediscovery of the one that was always yours. The journey back to yourself. Chapter 2. Why most people never discover who they really are. If losing yourself happens slowly, something even more surprising often follows. Many people never find their way back, not because it is impossible, but because modern life makes it incredibly easy to stay distracted. Think about how most days unfold. You wake up, you check your phone, you respond to messages, you rush through responsibilities. Work demands attention, notifications demand attention. Problems demand attention. By the end of the day, your mind is full of tasks, full of noise, full of other people's priorities. But very little of that attention is directed inward. And that is the reason many people reach the age of 30, 40, or even 60 without ever truly understanding themselves. Because discovering who you are requires something that modern life rarely encourages: stillness. Most people are constantly moving from task to task, from goal to goal, from distraction to distraction. But when your life is filled with constant movement, you rarely stop long enough to ask deeper questions. Questions like, what actually excites me? What kind of life would feel meaningful to me? Which parts of my life were chosen by me, and which parts were chosen out of habit? These questions are powerful. But they can also be uncomfortable, because the moment you ask them honestly, you might realize something unsettling. You might realize that many of your choices were never truly yours. They were simply the most convenient options available at the time. The career that seemed practical, the lifestyle that felt socially acceptable, the path that required the least resistance. And once someone begins moving down that path, it becomes increasingly difficult to step away from it. Responsibilities grow, expectations grow, the cost of changing direction grows. So instead of exploring who they truly are, many people simply continue moving forward, even if something inside them quietly senses that the direction may not be right. There is another reason people avoid discovering themselves: fear. Finding yourself is not always comfortable, because the truth about who you are may not align with the life you currently have. You might discover that the career you built does not reflect your real interests. You might realize that the goals you have been chasing belong more to society than to you. You might see that parts of your life were built on expectations rather than authenticity. And facing that truth can feel terrifying, because it introduces a difficult question. If the life I built does not fully reflect who I am, then what do I do now? For many people, it feels safer not to ask that question at all. So they stay busy. They fill their time with responsibilities. They keep moving forward, not necessarily because they are fulfilled, but because stopping might force them to confront something they are not ready to face. In a strange way, busyness becomes a form of protection. It protects people from having to examine their lives too closely. But deep down, something inside them still knows. A quiet awareness remains. It appears in small moments, moments when life becomes temporarily silent, when distractions fade, when the mind has space to wander. Maybe during a long drive, maybe during a late night when sleep doesn't come easily, maybe during a walk when no one else is around. And suddenly, a thought surfaces, a simple but powerful realization. I'm not sure I know who I really am. That realization can feel unsettling, but it can also be the beginning of something important. Because the moment someone becomes aware of that question, a door opens. The door to self-discovery. However, walking through that door requires courage. It requires slowing down in a world that constantly pushes you to move faster. It requires reflection in a culture that rewards productivity more than understanding. And perhaps, most importantly, it requires honesty. Honesty about what you truly want. Honesty about what you truly value. Honesty about the parts of your life that feel aligned, and the parts that don't. This kind of honesty can be uncomfortable at first, but it is also incredibly freeing. Because the moment you begin to understand yourself, something begins to change. Your decisions become clearer, your priorities become simpler, and the pressure to live according to other people's expectations slowly begins to fade. But before that transformation can happen, one thing must occur first. You must be willing to pause, to step away from the constant motion of life, and to ask a question that many people spend their entire lives avoiding. Who am I when no one else is telling me who to be? That question is where the journey truly begins. Because once it appears in your mind, it becomes very difficult to ignore. And the moment you begin searching for that answer, you are already taking the first step back toward yourself. Chapter 3. The silent pain of living a life that isn't yours. There is a kind of pain that most people never talk about. It doesn't look dramatic. It doesn't create headlines. And from the outside, the person experiencing it may appear completely fine. They might have a stable job, a comfortable life, responsibilities they handle well. Everything looks normal. But inside, something feels quietly wrong. Not broken, just misaligned. It's the feeling of waking up every day and moving through routines that don't fully feel like your own. You do the work you're supposed to do. You say the things you're expected to say. You follow the rhythm of the life you built, yet there is a subtle distance between you and the person living that life. Almost as if you are watching yourself perform it. And many people experience this feeling at some point in their lives, but they often struggle to explain it. Because nothing is obviously terrible. Their life may even look successful by normal standards. So when the emptiness appears, it feels confusing. How can I feel this way when everything is technically fine? The answer is simple, but difficult to accept. Because a life can look right from the outside, while feeling completely wrong on the inside. When a person builds their life primarily around expectations, they become very good at performing roles. The reliable employee, the responsible partner, the person who has everything under control. But roles are not the same as identity. And when someone spends too much time performing roles, they slowly lose contact with the person underneath them. This disconnection doesn't always appear immediately. Sometimes it takes years before the signs become noticeable. At first, it may appear as simple fatigue, a constant sense of being drained even when life isn't particularly difficult. Then, motivation begins to fade. Things that once seemed exciting now feel strangely flat. Goals that once felt important begin to lose their meaning, and eventually a deeper question begins to surface. Why does my life feel so heavy? Many people assume the problem is stress. or that they simply need a vacation, or that they need to push themselves harder. But often, the real issue is something deeper. They are carrying the weight of a life that does not fully belong to them. When you live in alignment with who you truly are, life still contains challenges, but the challenges feel purposeful. There is energy behind your actions. There is meaning behind your effort. When you live out of alignment with yourself, everything feels heavier. Even small tasks can feel exhausting, because every day requires you to continue playing a role that does not fully match your identity. And the human mind can only maintain that disconnect for so long before something begins to resist. Sometimes that resistance appears as frustration, sometimes as burnout, sometimes as a quiet sense that something inside you wants to change. The strange part is that many people ignore these signals for years. They convince themselves that the feeling will eventually disappear. They assume they just need to work harder, improve themselves more, or become more disciplined. But the discomfort keeps returning. Because the discomfort is not random, it is a signal. And that's a signal that something inside you is asking to be heard. The part of you that still remembers what authenticity feels like. The part of you that knows there is a difference between living and truly being alive. For some people, this realization arrives suddenly, a moment where everything becomes clear. For others, it grows slowly, a quiet awareness that becomes stronger over time. They begin to notice that certain parts of their life feel natural and energizing, while other parts feel forced and draining. They begin to see the gap between the person they present to the world and the person they feel themselves to be inside. And once someone becomes aware of that gap, something important begins to happen. They start questioning things they once accepted without thought. Why am I pursuing this path? What do I actually want? Who am I trying to become? These questions can feel uncomfortable because they challenge the stability of the life someone has already built. But they also carry something incredibly powerful: the possibility of living differently, the possibility of reconnecting with the person who existed before expectations shaped every decision. The moment someone begins asking these questions seriously, they are no longer completely trapped in the life they built. Because awareness changes everything. Once you see the disconnect, you cannot completely pretend it isn't there. And that awareness marks the beginning of transformation. Not an instant transformation, but the first step towards something deeper. The moment you begin to realize that the quiet discomfort you feel is not a weakness. It is a message from the part of you that refuses to disappear, the part of you that still remembers who you really are. And that part is about to lead you somewhere important, toward the moment when you finally begin questioning everything. Chapter 4. The moment you start questioning everything. For a long time, life can move forward almost automatically. You follow routines, you fulfill responsibilities, you move from one stage of life to the next. School leads to work, work leads to stability, stability leads to more responsibilities. Years pass this way, often without much reflection. You're simply doing what people are expected to do. And for a while, that momentum carries you forward. But at some point, something interrupts the rhythm. It might not look dramatic from the outside, yet internally, it feels like a shift. A moment where the mind suddenly pauses and looks at life from a different angle. Sometimes this moment is triggered by a crisis. A job that suddenly feels meaningless. A relationship that ends and forces you to reevaluate everything. A failure that shakes your confidence and leaves you wondering whether you were moving in the right direction all along. When those moments happen, they can feel painful, but they also create something rare. They create space. Space to step outside the routine and ask questions that were previously buried under busyness. Other times, the awakening arrives in a much quieter way. Nothing dramatic happens. Life continues as usual, but internally, a subtle awareness begins to grow. You notice that certain things that once excited you no longer carry the same energy. You notice that some of the goals you have been chasing feel strangely empty. You notice that parts of your life feel like obligations rather than genuine choices. At first, these observations appear only occasionally. They are easy to dismiss. You tell yourself that everyone feels this way sometimes, that maybe you just need rest, or motivation, or a new goal. But the thoughts keep returning, and each time they return, they stay a little longer. Until one day, a simple question appears with surprising clarity. Why am I doing all of this? It is a question that many people avoid for years, because once you begin asking it seriously, it becomes difficult to ignore the answers. The mind begins reviewing the path you have been walking. You start noticing how many decisions were made automatically, how many choices were influenced by expectations rather than genuine desire, how many directions were taken simply because they seemed like the logical next step. You begin to see the invisible script that has been guiding your life. The script that tells you what success should look like. The script that defines what a respectable life is supposed to be. The script that quietly tells you who you should become. For most of your life, that script felt normal. After all, everyone around you seemed to be following it as well. But once awareness begins, something changes. You start seeing the script instead of living inside it. And when that happens, a strange feeling appears, a mixture of confusion and clarity. Confusion because you realize how much of your life has been shaped by forces you never questioned. Clarity because you can now see that another path might exist. At this stage, many people feel a deep internal conflict. Part of them wants to continue life as it is. The familiar path feels safe, predictable, comfortable. But another part of them begins pushing for something different, something more authentic, something that feels aligned with who they truly are. This tension can be uncomfortable. It feels like standing between two different versions of your life, the life you have been living, and the life that might be waiting if you choose to listen to yourself more honestly. Many people try to suppress this conflict. They convince themselves that questioning things will only create problems. They remind themselves of the responsibilities they have, the expectations that others place on them, the stability they have already built. So they attempt to return to the routine, to ignore the questions, to continue moving forward as if nothing has changed. But something has changed. Once you begin questioning your life, the old certainty rarely returns. The mind has already seen the possibility of a different path, and that awareness slowly begins influencing everything. You start paying attention to what energizes you and what drains you. You begin noticing which environments feel natural and which feel restrictive. You become more aware of the difference between choices made out of fear and choices made out of authenticity. This growing awareness can feel unsettling at first because it challenges the identity you have been carrying for years. But it also contains a powerful opportunity, the opportunity to step outside the life you inherited and begin shaping a life that actually belongs to you. This does not mean abandoning everything overnight. Transformation rarely happens that way. Instead, it begins with something much simpler: honesty. Honesty about what feels right. Honesty about what feels forced. Honesty about the parts of your life that reflect your real values and the parts that do not. The moment you allow that honesty to exist, something inside you becomes clearer. The inner voice that was once buried under expectations begins to grow louder. At first, it speaks quietly, through small preferences, through subtle feelings of excitement or resistance. But the more you listen, the clearer it becomes. And slowly, you begin to trust it again. You begin realizing that the answers you were searching for outside yourself may have been within you all along, hidden beneath years of noise and conditioning. This stage of questioning is often misunderstood. Many people assume that questioning your life means something is wrong. But in reality, Questioning is often the beginning of growth. It is the mind waking up. It is awareness expanding beyond automatic routines. It is the first real step toward authenticity. Because before you can truly discover yourself, you must first question everything that is not truly you. And once that questioning begins, it leads you somewhere unexpected. It leads you toward a place that modern life often avoids. A place where clarity becomes possible. A place where the noise fades. A place where you finally have the space to hear your own thoughts again. It leads you toward solitude. And it is in that quiet space that something remarkable begins to happen. For the first time in a long time, you begin to meet the person behind all the expectations. The person you were before the world told you who to be. And that meeting changes everything. Chapter 5. Why being alone is where you finally find yourself. For many people, the idea of being alone feels uncomfortable. Not just physically alone, but truly alone with their thoughts. In a world filled with constant stimulation, silence can feel unfamiliar. Phones buzz, screens glow, voices, music, conversations, and information fill every empty moment. Modern life rarely leaves space for stillness, and because of that, many people unknowingly avoid the one place where self-discovery happens most clearly. Solitude. Solitude is different from loneliness. Loneliness is the painful feeling of being disconnected from others. Solitude, on the other hand, is the intentional act of stepping away from noise in order to reconnect with yourself. Yet many people confuse the two. They believe that being alone means something is wrong, and that it means they are isolated, that it means they are missing something. But throughout history, many of the most insightful thinkers actively sought solitude, not because they disliked people, but because they understood something important. When the noise of the world fades, the voice within you becomes easier to hear. Most of the time, our minds are filled with external input. Opinions from friends, expectations from family, advice from society, messages from social media. When these voices are constantly present, they begin to shape the way we think. Without realizing it, we start adopting ideas that may not truly belong to us. We begin chasing goals that were never originally ours. We begin living according to definitions of success that we never personally chose. And because these influences surround us constantly, it becomes difficult to separate our authentic desires from the expectations of others. This is why solitude is so powerful. When you step away from constant external input, something interesting begins to happen. Your mind slowly begins to settle. At first, it may feel uncomfortable. Without distractions, the thoughts you normally avoid begin to appear. Questions you pushed aside start resurfacing. Unresolved emotions come into view. Many people interpret this as a negative experience. But in reality, it is a sign that your mind is beginning to clear. For the first time in a long time, you are hearing your own thoughts instead of reacting to the world around you. In that quiet space, something subtle begins to emerge. Your authentic preferences. You start noticing what genuinely interests you, what energizes you, what feels meaningful rather than simply impressive. These discoveries rarely arrive in dramatic moments. Instead, they appear quietly, during a long walk, during a quiet evening with no distractions, during a moment when your mind is finally allowed to wander without pressure. In these moments, clarity begins to form. You begin to recognize which parts of your life feel natural and which parts feel forced. You start noticing patterns. Certain environments make you feel alive. Certain conversations stimulate your thinking. Certain activities make time seem to disappear. These are important signals. They reveal parts of your identity that may have been buried under years of expectation. Solitude also gives you something else that modern life often takes away: perspective. When you are constantly inside the rhythm of daily life, it is difficult to see it clearly. You are too close to it. But when you step back, even briefly, you begin seeing things differently. You start recognizing habits that once felt automatic. You begin questioning goals that once seemed obvious. You notice how certain pressures have been influencing your decisions. This distance allows you to examine your life more honestly, without the immediate influence of other people's opinions, without the pressure to respond quickly, without the constant comparison that social environments often create. In solitude, your thoughts slow down, and when thoughts slow down, awareness deepens. Many people fear this kind of reflection because it can reveal uncomfortable truths. You might realize that certain goals you've been chasing no longer feel meaningful. You might recognize that some parts of your life were built primarily around approval rather than authenticity. You might see that you have been ignoring parts of yourself that quietly wanted something different. These realizations can feel unsettling, but they are also incredibly valuable, because awareness is the beginning of change. Without awareness, people continue living according to patterns they never question. But once awareness appears, something shifts. You begin to see that your life is not fixed. It is something that can evolve, something that can be shaped more intentionally, something that can become more aligned with who you truly are. Another important gift of solitude is emotional clarity. When you're constantly surrounded by activity, emotions can become blurred. You react quickly. You move from one experience to the next without fully processing what you feel. But when you spend time alone, emotions have space to unfold. You can observe them instead of immediately reacting to them. You begin noticing which situations create genuine fulfillment and which ones create tension or resistance. This emotional awareness becomes a powerful guide. It helps you recognize where your energy naturally wants to go and where it feels forced. Over time, solitude transforms from something uncomfortable into something valuable. Instead of fearing silence, you begin appreciating it, because it becomes the place where you reconnect with yourself, the place where your mind can breathe, the place where your identity slowly begins to reveal itself again. You realize that the answers you were searching for in the outside world were never entirely there. They were waiting within you, but they could only emerge once the noise around you became quiet enough. And once you begin hearing that inner voice again, something remarkable starts to happen. Your decisions become more intentional. Your direction becomes clearer. You start building a life that feels less like a performance and more like an honest expression of who you are. However, this stage introduces a new challenge, because once you begin understanding your true self, another difficult step appears. You must decide whether you are willing to live according to that truth. And that step requires something many people struggle with: courage. The courage to stop being the person the world expected you to be. Chapter 6. The courage to stop being who the world expected. Discovering who you truly are can be a powerful experience. For the first time in years, things start to make sense. You begin understanding your preferences more clearly. You start recognizing what genuinely matters to you. You notice which environments feel natural and which ones drain your energy. In many ways, this stage feels like waking up after a long period of living on autopilot. But something surprising happens at this point. Understanding yourself is only the first step. The more difficult step comes next, living according to that understanding. Because once you begin recognizing who you truly are, you also begin noticing the gap between your authentic self and the life you're currently living. For some people, that gap is small. For others, it can feel enormous. You may realize that the career you chose was shaped more by practicality than by passion. You may see that certain relationships were built around expectations rather than genuine connection. You may notice that parts of your personality have been adjusted for years in order to make others comfortable. These realizations can feel unsettling because they introduce a question that many people would rather avoid. If I now understand myself more clearly, am I willing to live differently? This is where courage becomes essential. Not the dramatic kind of courage that appears in heroic stories, but a quieter, more difficult kind. The courage to stop performing a role that no longer feels authentic. For many people, the role they have been playing has existed for years, sometimes even decades. They have become known as a certain kind of person. The reliable one, the successful one, the agreeable one, the one who always follows the expected path. These identities can feel safe. They provide structure, they provide approval, they provide a sense of belonging. But they can also become a cage. Because the longer someone plays a role, the more difficult it becomes to step outside of it. People around you grow accustomed to the version of you they know. They build expectations around that version. They assume that you will continue behaving in familiar ways. And when you begin changing, those expectations can create tension. Some people may not understand the changes you are making. They might question your decisions. They might worry that you are making a mistake. Sometimes they may even try to persuade you to return to the version of yourself they recognize. Not because they intend harm, but because change disrupts the patterns that everyone has grown used to. For this reason, many people hesitate when they reach this stage. They realize that living authentically may require them to make choices that others do not immediately support. And that possibility can feel intimidating. Human beings naturally seek acceptance. We want to feel understood. We want to feel connected. So when authenticity threatens those connections, it creates internal conflict. Part of you wants to move toward the life that feels true. Another part fears the consequences of stepping away from familiar expectations. This tension is completely normal. In fact, it is often a sign that you are standing at an important turning point. Because every meaningful transformation requires a moment where you must choose between comfort and authenticity. Comfort keeps things familiar. It preserves the roles that people already expect from you. But authenticity asks you to listen to something deeper, your inner sense of alignment. That quiet voice that tells you when something feels right and when something feels wrong. Following that voice does not mean abandoning responsibility or ignoring the people who care about you. Authenticity is not about rebellion. It is about honesty. Honesty about the life you want to live. Honesty about the direction that feels meaningful to you. Honesty about the parts of your life that need to evolve. Often, these changes begin in small ways. You start setting clearer boundaries. You stop agreeing to things that consistently drain your energy. You begin prioritizing activities that feel genuinely meaningful. These decisions may appear small from the outside, but internally, they represent something powerful. You're choosing alignment over expectation. Over time, these small choices begin reshaping your life. You move closer to environments that support who you truly are. You spend more time doing things that energize you. You interact with people who appreciate the authentic version of you rather than the role you once played. This process does not happen instantly. It unfolds gradually. With each decision, you gain a little more clarity, a little more confidence, a little more trust in your own judgment. You begin realizing that authenticity does not destroy your life, it refines it. It removes the parts that never truly belonged to you, and it strengthens the parts that reflect who you really are. Of course, moments of doubt still appear. That is natural. Anytime you step away from familiar patterns, uncertainty will arise. But something else begins to grow alongside that uncertainty. Self-respect. Because every time you make a decision that reflects your authentic values, you strengthen your relationship with yourself. You begin trusting your instincts more. You begin recognizing that your life does not have to follow someone else's script. You have the ability to shape it intentionally. And as this realization deepens, something remarkable begins to happen. You stop living primarily for approval. You stop measuring your worth by external standards. Instead, you begin focusing on something much more meaningful. Building a life that feels true. A life that reflects your values, your curiosity, your identity. A life that may not always impress everyone, but feels deeply real to you. And once you begin living in that way, the next stage of the journey becomes possible. Not just discovering who you are, not just stepping away from expectations, but consciously creating a life that reflects your authentic self, a life that actually feels like yours. Chapter 7. Designing a life that actually feels like yours. Once you stop living according to expectations alone, a new question begins to emerge. If you're no longer following the script that the world handed to you, then what kind of life do you want to create instead? For many people, this question feels both exciting and intimidating. Exciting because it opens the door to possibilities that once seemed out of reach. Intimidating because it removes the familiar structure that once guided every decision. When people follow expectations, the path is already defined. You simply move from one milestone to the next. Graduate, find work, build stability, continue climbing. But when you begin living more authentically, the path becomes less predictable. There is no single blueprint. Instead, you must begin designing a life that reflects who you truly are. At first, this can feel confusing. After years of adapting to expectations, many people are no longer used to asking themselves what they genuinely want. Their decisions have been shaped by practicality, approval, or habit. So the idea of building a life around personal values may feel unfamiliar, but clarity begins with something simple: paying attention to what gives you energy. Every person experiences moments where they feel naturally engaged with what they are doing. Moments when time seems to pass quickly. Moments when effort feels meaningful rather than exhausting. These moments provide clues. They reveal activities, environments, and ideas that resonate with your deeper nature. On the other hand, there are also experiences that consistently drain your energy. Situations that leave you feeling disconnected or forced. Tasks that feel like obligations rather than expressions of who you are. These signals are equally important. They help you recognize which parts of your life may need adjustment. Designing a life that feels authentic does not mean eliminating every challenge. Every meaningful path contains difficulty, but there is a difference between challenges that feel purposeful and challenges that feel empty. When a challenge aligns with your values, it can feel energizing. Even when it is difficult, there is a sense that the effort matters. But when a challenge is connected to expectations that are not truly yours, it often feels draining. The effort begins to feel like survival rather than growth. Learning to recognize this difference is an important step in building an authentic life. And another key element in this process is defining your personal values. Values act as internal guides. They help you decide which opportunities align with your identity and which ones do not. Without clear values, decisions can become confusing. You may find yourself pulled in many directions, responding to external pressure rather than inner clarity. But when you know what truly matters to you, decisions become simpler, not always easier, but clearer. For example, if creativity is one of your core values, you may naturally move toward environments where ideas are encouraged. If freedom is important to you, you may prioritize flexibility over status. If connection matters most, you may build a life centered around meaningful relationships rather than achievements alone. There is no universal set of values that fits everyone. Authenticity means discovering the combination that reflects your own nature. As you begin shaping your life around these values, another important skill becomes essential: boundaries. When you live according to expectations, boundaries are often weak. You say yes to requests because you feel obligated. You take on responsibilities that others expect you to accept. You prioritize external approval over personal alignment. But when you begin designing your own life, boundaries become necessary. They protect your time, they protect your energy, they protect the space you need to grow into the person you are becoming. Setting boundaries can feel uncomfortable at first, especially if people are used to the previous version of you. But boundaries are not acts of rejection, they are acts of clarity. They communicate what matters to you. They help ensure that your life is guided by intention rather than constant pressure. Over time, as your values become clearer and your boundaries become stronger, something important begins to happen. Your life starts to feel more coherent. Your decisions begin aligning with your identity. Your daily actions begin reflecting what you truly care about. This alignment creates a sense of stability that external approval can never fully provide. Because the foundation of your life is no longer built primarily on expectations. It is built on understanding. Understanding of who you are, understanding of what matters to you, understanding of the direction that feels meaningful. This does not mean your life becomes perfect. Authenticity does not eliminate uncertainty, but it does create something far more valuable. Integrity. The feeling that your actions and your identity are no longer in conflict. When that alignment exists, even ordinary moments begin to feel different. Work feels more purposeful. Relationships feel more genuine. Decisions feel less confusing. You are no longer constantly adjusting yourself to fit into someone else's definition of success. You are building something that reflects your own. And as that life begins to take shape, a quiet realization appears. The freedom you were searching for was never simply about escaping responsibility. It was about living in a way that feels true, a way that allows you to wake up each day knowing that the life you are living actually belongs to you. And when that realization settles in, you reach the final stage of this journey, the stage where authenticity transforms into something deeper, the freedom of finally becoming yourself. Chapter 8. The freedom of finally becoming yourself. For a long time, many people believe freedom comes from external things: more money, more time, more opportunities. They imagined that if they could just reach a certain level of success, life would suddenly feel lighter. But something interesting often happens. People achieve the things they once believed would make them free, and yet the feeling they expected never fully arrives. Because the deepest form of freedom has very little to do with external circumstances. It comes from something far more personal. Being yourself, truly being yourself. Not the version shaped by expectations, not the version designed to impress others, but the version of you that exists when there is nothing left to prove. For many people, reaching this point takes time, years of questioning, years of reflection, years of slowly separating their real identity from the roles they once believed they had to play. But when that process begins to settle, something remarkable happens. Life starts to feel lighter, not because all problems disappear. Challenges still exist, responsibilities still exist, but the internal struggle begins to fade. For years, many people live with a hidden tension, a tension between who they are and who they believe they need to be. They constantly adjust themselves to match expectations. They monitor how they speak, how they behave, how they present themselves to the world. It becomes a subtle performance that runs in the background of everyday life, and maintaining that performance requires energy. A lot of energy. When you finally begin living as your authentic self, that performance slowly disappears. So you stop trying to carefully construct how you appear to others. You stop measuring your worth through comparison. You stop chasing approval from people who never truly understood you in the first place. Instead, something quieter replaces that effort, a sense of internal stability. You know who you are. You know what matters to you. And that clarity makes many decisions simpler. You no longer feel the need to explain every choice you make. You no longer feel the need to justify your direction to everyone around you, because your life is no longer guided primarily by approval. It is guided by alignment. This kind of freedom does not mean you become indifferent to other people. Connection remains important. Relationships remain meaningful. But the way you relate to others changes. Now, instead of trying to be accepted by becoming what others expect, you allow yourself to be seen as you truly are. Some people will appreciate that authenticity. Others may not fully understand it. And that is perfectly fine. Because authenticity is not about being approved by everyone. It is about being honest with yourself. Another powerful change happens when someone begins living authentically. Fear begins to lose its power. For many years, fear often controls people's decisions. Fear of judgment, fear of failure, fear of disappointing others. These fears can quietly shape entire lives. They push people toward safe choices, toward predictable paths, toward lives that feel acceptable rather than meaningful. But when you begin living according to your authentic values, those fears start to fade. Not because they disappear completely, but because they are no longer the primary force guiding your decisions. Your decisions begin coming from a deeper place, from curiosity, from purpose, from a desire to experience life honestly rather than safely. This shift creates a new kind of confidence. Not loud confidence, not arrogance, but a calm sense of certainty. You trust yourself. You trust your ability to navigate life according to your own understanding. And because of that trust, you stop constantly searching for validation. You stop asking the world for permission to be who you are. Instead, you move through life with a quiet sense of direction. A direction that may not always look impressive to others, but feels deeply meaningful to you. One of the most surprising aspects of this stage is how simple life begins to feel. When you stop chasing identities that were never yours, many unnecessary pressures disappear. You no longer feel the need to prove that your life fits a certain image. You no longer compare your timeline to everyone else's. You begin focusing on what actually matters in your own experience. Meaningful work, authentic relationships, personal growth, peace of mind. These things may not always appear dramatic from the outside, but internally they create something incredibly valuable, a sense of belonging within your own life. You feel at home in the life you are living, not because it is perfect, but because it reflects who you truly are. And this realization reveals something profound. The purpose of self-discovery was never to create a completely new version of yourself. It was to remove the layers that prevented your real self from being seen, to return to the clarity that existed before expectations became so loud. When that clarity returns, life begins to feel different. Moments feel more present, experiences feel more genuine, even simple things begin to carry more meaning. Because you are no longer observing your life from a distance. You are fully inside it, living it, experiencing it. And that is when the central truth of this journey becomes clear. Your life was never meant to be a performance. It was meant to be an expression of your curiosity, your values, your perspective, your unique way of experiencing the world. The moment you allow that expression to guide your life, is the moment something beautiful happens. You stop searching for the life you were meant to live. And you begin living it, because your life truly begins the moment you finally become yourself. As we reach the end of this journey, it's worth pausing for a moment and reflecting on everything we've explored together. Because the ideas we talked about are not just theories. They are experiences that many people quietly live through every day. The feeling of slowly losing yourself while trying to meet expectations. The confusion of achieving things that were supposed to make you happy, but somehow don't. The quiet realization that you may have been living according to a script that was never truly yours. And then, the moment when something begins to change. The moment when you start asking deeper questions. Who am I, really? What kind of life actually feels true to me? What would happen if I stopped trying to become the person the world expected and started becoming the person I truly am? These questions can feel uncomfortable at first, because they challenge the familiar structures that many of us have built our lives around. But they are also incredibly powerful, because every meaningful transformation begins with awareness. The moment you begin questioning your life is the moment you begin waking up inside it. From there, the journey continues. You learn to step away from constant noise and spend time in solitude. You begin listening to your own thoughts again. You start noticing what energizes you and what drains you. You begin understanding your values, your preferences, and the parts of yourself that may have been hidden under years of expectation. And slowly, with patience, something beautiful begins to happen. You reconnect with yourself, not the version shaped by pressure, not the version designed to gain approval, but the authentic version that has always existed beneath the surface. And when that connection returns, life begins to change in subtle but meaningful ways. Your decisions become clearer, your priorities become simpler, your direction becomes more honest. You stop chasing every opportunity that appears impressive from the outside. Instead, you begin choosing the experiences that genuinely feel meaningful. You stop measuring your worth through comparison. You start defining success in a way that reflects your own values, and perhaps, most importantly, you begin building a life that actually feels like it belongs to you. This process is not something that happens overnight. Self-discovery is not a single moment. It is an ongoing journey, a gradual unfolding of awareness, honesty, and growth. There will still be moments of uncertainty, moments when old patterns try to pull you back into familiar expectations, moments when the path forward feels unclear. But each time you return to your authentic self, you strengthen something important. Trust in your own understanding. Trust in your own direction. Trust in the idea that your life does not have to follow anyone else's timeline or definition of success. Your life can evolve in a way that reflects your curiosity, your values, and your unique perspective. And that realization is incredibly freeing, because it reminds you that life is not something you have to perform perfectly. It is something you are allowed to explore, to experience, to shape as you grow. So as you leave this audiobook and return to your daily life, carry one simple idea with you. You don't have to change everything at once. You don't have to suddenly reinvent your entire life, but you can begin with awareness. Pay attention to what feels true. Pay attention to what energizes you. Pay attention to the quiet voice inside that knows when something feels aligned and when it doesn't. Little by little, those moments of awareness begin guiding you toward a life that feels more authentic, a life that feels lighter, a life that feels real. And as you continue moving in that direction, you may one day look back and realize something remarkable. The life you were searching for was never somewhere far away. It was waiting inside you all along, waiting for the moment when you were finally ready to discover yourself. Thank you for spending this time reflecting, thinking, and exploring these ideas. And wherever your journey takes you next, remember one simple truth. Your life truly begins the moment you choose to be yourself.